just making a video on how to replace the A-arm bushings on a snowmobile. I just happened to have to do it on my own sled, and I was looking online trying to figure out how to do it because I didn't want to send it off to a mechanic, and I thought I'd save myself some money. I noticed that nowhere on YouTube or in any of the forums were any photos that really took me as far as getting it stripped right down to the bushings. There is a on one of the forums on ty4stroke.com. Guy Apex06, I believe was his name, listed step by step how to actually take the machine apart right down to the point where you actually start working on the bushings. So I thought I would add a video on YouTube to help anybody else like myself take it a little bit further and go step by step, and add some of the tips that I found online about easy ways to take the bushings on or take the bushings off and put them back on, and where to start from in the procedure. I hope this video helps you, and good luck. Okay, so far this is what I've done. I've got it stripped down following that guy's link on Totally Yamaha. Pulled out the air box, well, basically took all the cowlings and stuff off, the hood, the headlights, battery. Whoa! Took the battery box out, including the battery. One little thing that he missed is there's a couple extra screws down here that you have to take out for the battery box and the battery bracket, which goes off to the left and right. And then you'll find the bushings. The two A-arm bushings are in here and here, and then two in the back further back over there. And then you have some in here on the spindle. There's one there, there, and then if you're going to actually take the spindle off and do those, which you should, there's one down here and one in here that you have to do. Okay, so one thing to cover too is the tools that you'll need to do this job. This is pretty much what I used, including a really good ratchet set with a few different ratchets, just basically that there, which looks like a mess right now, but you pretty much need 12 mil, 14 mil, and 17 mil ratchets and wrenches. And then I just used a small hammer just to tap them lightly. I also used this bolt and washer to basically put in the bushing like that, so that when I tap it, I'm tapping it evenly into the hole, because the last thing you want to do is just tap it on one edge and then you end up breaking it like the guy that had these last time. This is probably going to help you do the most difficult areas. A threaded rod, 3/8 threaded rod, a couple nuts, a few different size washers, because it really makes it easy to push the pieces back together without using this, where you may end up damaging it or causing it to mushroom, since it is a soft metal. You need Loctite. I only use this just to kind of pry things apart, and then a block of wood to bang the spindles back down in place, and that's it for now. Okay, so getting started. I got myself all set up with my tools, my ratchet set right next to me, because the last thing you really want to do is get up, get down, and you start forgetting where you put the bolts. I found it easier for myself basically to remove the bolt on the shock, to remove the shock from the lower A-arm first, and then also to remove, I think this is the stabilizer, basically just remove that bolt there, which will pretty much allow the ski to just drop. The only thing you got to watch though is then that leaves all the weight on the tie rod or the steering column, which can get tough on it. So what I ended up doing is just putting some supports under the ski, just to keep it basically at this height, to work on and support it while I'm working. That way we can keep the A-arm from, or this rod from getting bent, and keep the tension off it, since it does stay attached the entire time. The only bolt that you do have to remove on this linkage is this guy right here, which is pretty tough, at least on this one, which will allow this whole part to drop down off this, and I'll leave that all free swinging. One thing to remember though, when you do put this back together, this little cap will remove, and there's a little dot on the end of this inside of there, and there's also a circle on the spindle that comes through here. You have to line those up because you'll see later on in the video that this is almost like a gear, how they fit together. So you line those two dots up, that way you know you have this back in the original spot and your ski's not going to be twisted in or out. Okay, so far I've removed the little bolt here from there. One thing I've done just to kind of keep myself organized is I just put the bolts and nuts back together somewhere where I'm not going to lose them, and typically I find that's the best place to put it is when the part that's not going to be removed. I removed the bolt and nut from here. Because I will be removing that, I've kept it separate and just thrown it in a little dish, magnetic dish, so it stays close. And I've also now removed the bolt that goes through there to hold the shock in place. I pulled this out just so I can show you that that piece is in there, so you don't want to lose that. If that comes out, the two little rubber bushings on either side will fall off. No big deal, you can just put it back in. When you're reassembling, you just want to put a little bit of grease or a little bit of oil in there just to keep it lubricated. One thing to think about too when doing this job is, since you have all this stuff out, you're probably doing it either off season. I'm happy to be doing it in season. An oil change is right there. It's very simple to do, especially since the oil filter is, if you can see it, right there. That's the oil filter. So it's one of these jobs that if you're going to go this far, you might as well just do everything at once and again save yourself some money. So the next step after removing the bolt from the shock, the nut there and the bolt up there that connects that piece to the little arm there, I'm just going to actually remove the bolts connecting the arms to the spindle. Just that one, there's a nut back there, bolt, and then the last thing I'll do is just pull the bolts and nuts off the A-arms, connecting it to the bulkhead, and now you'll probably have full access to all those bushings to remove and replace, and I'll show you that once I get everything disconnected. 14 mil nuts and bolts pretty much. The lower one is about 17. If you're like me, a ratchet set doesn't have a wrench in it for 17 mil, so I just use 2 ratchets. Either side makes it nice and easy. You also notice that there's another little post in there that you have to watch, and this ring here is actually the bushing that you'll be replacing for the lower A-arm, and you have the other one up top. So if you find the bolts a little difficult to pull out, just lift the ski a little bit from the spindle. Actually, you can see that's free right now from the ski, and there's the post in there, only because I've taken the bolt out here, which has sort of released the tension on it. So once you get that out, this one should just drop down, and again you can see there's a set of washers in there that you need to remember, and the washers are only on the upper A-arm because the bushings are actually a little bit countersunk in. So remember those 2 washers. Again, I find the best thing to do is to put them back on the bolt, so you remember when you're putting all this back together that those washers went there, so you're not wondering later on why you have leftover parts. Okay, so I pulled the little, I don't know what you want to call this anyway, I pulled it out of there, actually from this side. The bushing came with it. It's a little stubborn to get off. If you have to, you can basically put a light grip on this. You don't want to put it too tight into a vise, and you can kind of just tap down to slide that out, and this will just get caught resting on the vise. To pop this out without damaging around here from the inside, I basically took a smaller 3.5 inch hex bolt, the washer, and just put it inside and lightly tapped with my hammer going that way. Just only reason why I use that is because it's basically the same diameter of the head of this, so it wouldn't cause any damage. So here's what I'm talking about with the to pull these two pieces apart. This is from the lower A-arm. I just put this in my vise, but again, like I said, you don't want any pressure on this so you wreck the diameter or put it out of shape at all. So I just make my vise spaced far enough that catches on there. And again, I'll just put the bolt, you don't need the washer, but put the bolt in there so it sits on that, and I'll just lightly tap that down, and I'll catch that piece so it doesn't fall and hit the floor. I just put a box there so it catches it. Okay, just another little reminder, just so you help yourself. And really, when you're doing this job, I would only recommend doing one side at a time. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch of bolts, bunch of nuts. You don't know what's going to go where unless you're extremely organized. For myself, again, put this piece back here so I know that goes with that arm inside of there. The bolt up here with the two washers I showed you earlier. There's the washer, there's the piece that goes inside of there. The other washer, the nut. And again, keep them in my little magnet dish, keep everything organized. That way when I go to put everything back, I'm not looking around trying to figure out what went where and not missing any parts. Okay, so I just removed this, but I thought maybe it'd be a good thing to show, just to show you quickly. At this point, once you get the arms off, you have all these bolts pulled out, your ski is basically just going to slide out just like that. All sorts of grease in there. You can just put that on the ground. These two pieces will come apart like that, and that's your spindle. So you should have your bushing sitting one there, one there. This one just slid out on its own, which is nice. Saves you some aggravation. And then two over here. There's also one on the bottom. The stock ones are plastic. A little easier to deal with getting it up back on that post I found when I did the other side than the metal ones, but those plastic ones are going to break and they won't last very long, so you want to replace them with the nice Elite ones. And there's also one in here, and I'll show you how to get those out later. This little cap, you just pop that out with your finger from the top. That way when you're setting these pieces back together, you can see the little circles that I'm talking about for lining the two up. You'll actually see it if you clean the grease off there. There is a little dot right at the top, and then there's a little circle on the top of this post. When I'm actually putting them together, I'll take a better shot of it from the top so you can see how they line up. But you can see the grooving, the teeth in here that have to line up the teeth in this piece here. Okay, so now to remove the bushings out of the spindle. This is again where having one of these bolts comes in handy, because I will just basically put it on the edge. You want to try and bang around evenly, that way it doesn't get cockeyed inside the round hole, and it'll just sort of pop out on its own eventually. And you can do the same up there. You can see how as soon as you find the edge, it doesn't go all the way through. But again, just bang gently, because you don't really want to cut any grooves into the inside of the spindle or anything like that. And I use a bolt because it does have a nice round shape to it, nice and flat, so that it kind of works with the shape of the inside. So you just tap that way, tap this way, basically until they all pop up. Okay, so in the kit that you get, you're going to get the two largest bushings that match the same size as the plastic ones that you pulled out of there. One is going to slide in the top, just like that. Line it up as square as possible. The other one's going to go in the bottom. And then this is where, using the 3/8 rod, you can either use it to compress them in by using the nut, putting another nut and a large fender washer on the bottom. And you basically just tighten it in, and it's going to put those in nice and even without risking the chance of cracking the joint between the flange and the actual bushing that goes inside the hole. So that's probably your easiest way to do it, cleanest way. It may seem like a lot of work because you got to turn so far on the screws, but once you try it, you'll notice that it goes in really smooth and really easy by basically just dropping this in place. You have to put that fender washer in from down here and then thread the rod through because it won't actually go through the top, but once you do it, I'll show you once I get it all set up. Okay, so now I got it all set up with basically the nut and washers down there. I put 2 washers in there just to kind of keep the weight spread out evenly. I just got it snug and tight so that I can make sure that these are lined up nice and even. And then as you tighten it, because I'm using 3/8 nuts and bolts, it's just a number 14. As you go, you'll see these basically compress. You see the bottom one actually going in before the top. The top one's going in a little bit, but this makes it nice and easy. There's no damage to anything. This is one of the tips I saw actually on Totally Yamaha. I read it in one of their forums, and I just go tight enough just so that I see the grease actually start to sort of mushroom out from under the flanges, and that should be it. And you just release your bolts and done. You can use this method on these ones because basically you can do it the same way, but you save yourself some aggravation, use a shorter rod. And then actually when you do the bulkhead, it's going to be the exact same thing. You just have to remember the orientation that the bushings go in the bulkhead. They actually go inside the back here. They will go in this way, so you have to put the bushing from the inside, and then the bushing at the front goes from the outside in. So once you remember that, you set it all up and you use this method, it will make your life much easier, and you will see how this is such an easy job to do. So just go over the bags of bushings that you get. There's a bag that comes with 8 bushings, a little bit longer than the other bags. These smaller bushings will go here and here, and then also when you get to the upper A-arm, it will go inside the top. So that's the bag of 8 bushings. What I found was a good idea is as I went through and removed, I compared them to the bags because the kit does not label where these bushings are for. So as I finished the other side, I just put a note: A-arm, spindle, and upper A-arm itself. And then all the other bags I did the same thing as far as labeling it. That way I don't get confused later on, and it helps me move a little bit faster through the project on the second half. Okay, so there you have it. All the new bushings in the spindle. One thing for me, I don't like the old grease that builds up in there, so if you want to clean it up, get everything off of it, one thing you can always remember, like dissolves like. So just get a little bit of fresh grease, rub it on the older stuff that's a little bit more stubborn, and then once it'll start to break up, and then once it's sort of loose, you can just wipe it clean with a rag. Okay, now that the bushings are all out and done down on the spindle, it's time to take out the 2 lower and upper A-arms, and that's going to be done by removing that bolt, which runs through the A-arm, through there, and then it's kind of hard to see, but there is one nut, that's for the upper, and the other one, if you actually turn the steering wheel, one sec, sorry, turn the steering wheel, can you see that one? Might be able to, just right by the where it's the linkage is tied to that piece, you'll see a nut. If you can see my finger, you can actually see the shiny bushing that's existing in there. So that's where the nut is. And you can see the rubber kind of building up in the way there. But you'll just put basically your wrench on this side, and do your ratcheting from this side, and these things will slide out no problem. As you're pulling it, again, you might find it easier just to kind of wiggle the arm a little bit. You actually see that one's spinning with the arm. So is that one. So they're pretty tight in there. Anyway, once you slide those out, pop the bushings out, and then we'll get to the next part. Just quickly too, one thing you got to watch when you remove the nuts off of the bolts here, the axles or whatever you want to call them, coming through into the bulkhead inside the engine bay, there is a washer on behind the nut on this piece. So just make sure when you're taking the bolt out that you hang on to that washer, that way it doesn't fall down inside and make it a little bit difficult to try and grab later on. When you pull out the A-arms, after you've got the bolt out, the A-arm itself actually has these little plastic washers or caps, I guess you could call it, that go on the ends just like that. As soon as you pull this out, those things are just going to fall off, so just make sure you grab them and remember to put them back in when you're reassembling. So for those, I'll just basically put them on that bolt, so I remember that goes on there. The lower A-arm should also have that as well. Okay, so when I was showing you the tools earlier, I had this sitting on the floor. What I find using this for is actually the little ring that goes around there that's flat. I don't know how well you can make that out. But anyway, to get the bushings out of the front and back, these ones you're going to push through going that way. That way, these ones at the front are going to come out this way. I just found putting that little edge basically on the lip of the bushing itself and just lightly tapping with the hammer this way made it easier to get those things out without hitting the bulk itself and damaging it. Okay, so now I'm going to get to reinstalling the bushings now that I got them out of the bulkhead at the front and the back, or sorry, at the back and the front, here and here. To do this, again, 3/8 threaded rod is going to be the easiest thing. Basically what you have to do, put your bushing in the hole first, you slide your rod through this bushing and just bring the rod so it's just through the bulkhead there, and then you'll take your bushing, you can see the rod, where are you, right there, so you see the rod there, and what you'll end up doing is putting the bushing on there first from the inside going this way, put a washer after that and a nut, and then you come back to this side with your bushing on there I don't have any of the bushings there right now, but just for the video, you put your bushing, washer, bring the nut tight, snug everything up, just kind of wiggle it around to make sure everything's nice and lined up between the front and the back, and then just tighten it just like we did with the spindle with the top and bottom, and repeat that for the lower, and you'll be ready basically to put the arms back in and start reassembling. So there, now you can see that how I have it set up with the sorry about the quality, shitty old camera, but the bushing is right there on the inside, the rod running through, it's just slightly snugged in. The bushing on the inside actually kind of went in partially itself, so it centered itself in the hole. This one I just pushed in a little bit by hand as well. Forget it. And you can see, actually I turned the steering wheel so I could get in there. And you can see just basically the head of the screw right down there with the bushing in front of it. And I would do this on camera, but because I need to put a wrench in here and a ratchet on the outside, it's too hard to do with one hand. I'm just reassembling the spindle, and this was the collar, I guess you want to call it. It was around the one axle that went through the lower A-arm, because this actually goes on the unit like that. So this is where I was telling you again, 3/8 rod is probably going to be your best friend to doing this project, because it is quite stubborn getting it in and lining it up perfect into the new bushings. And the last thing you want to do is be hammering on this, because that's where you end up cracking the bushing and separating it from its flange. So again, you just basically use the wrench and a ratchet and just tighten her up. Once it gets past the bushing at the end, and you kind of can see the discoloration, that's because there's a space between the two bushings in there. Once this kind of reaches that point, you'll feel it just kind of pop free until it gets to the other side where the other bushing is. So you got to tighten the nuts up to that point, play around with this, line it up, and then finish tightening it up. There you go. So that's where you see it going free now. So I'll tighten this nut up to here. Now this, make sure that this is seated, centered on the bushing inside there. You kind of feel it just fall into a little pocket. Pretty much does it automatically, but you just want to make sure that you're doing it properly so that you don't end up causing any damage inside there and fighting the two pieces. I'm going to start putting the A-arms back on now that I got the spindle prepped up, ready to go. Have the collars in there. The bottom one is a little more snug than the top one. The top one actually just popped in. No issues, I didn't have to use any rod or anything like that. Bottom one, again, don't forget the plastic collars that go on the ends before you slide them in there. So you just kind of got to hold it, slide her in, and go. Don't forget the washer, also on the inside. Once you slide the rod through, washer and nut on the inside. So I'm about to put the ski back on, but probably one of the most important tips I can show you, if it shows up in the camera. Try to find a way. There, you see the little, I don't know if the camera's going to zoom in. You can see the little dot or a little mark just at the top there. And then when you go to the ski, right on top of the spindle. How can I get this to work? Oh, right at the top there. You'll see it's better without the light, little dot right there. When you line up the splines or the teeth on here with the teeth inside of here, those two dots need to be lined up to make sure that your skis are perfectly aligned. That way you don't have to worry about one ski being pointed one way and the other one another way. Okay, so I've got the ski back supported on jacks. I actually find that these are really easy to use because I can adjust the height up or down as I need it. I put the spindle back on, and you can see I only went as high as that. That way when I go to put this piece back in, the key basically, I can slide it in there and properly line those two dots up that I was mentioning earlier. And that you can watch basically from up here, where you can sort of make out that dot at the top of the spindle, and go from there. Okay, so that's it. All the parts are back on. All the bushings are changed now. We've put all the screws back together. We got the Allen key head bolt back in there to grip that tight. Got the little control done. The shock is back on. So now all we have to do is basically tighten all of the bolts to torque settings, which is in the manual or you can find online. Just don't forget to go through each one, torque each one to the proper setting. Don't over torque it. And anything outside, I basically use some thread lock just to keep it from getting corroded or anything like that and stuck for the next time I want to do this. So hope this video helped. Good luck.